At 36 years old, with a steady salary of $66,000 a year from his job as an aerospace machinist at Spirit Aerosystems, Pierce thought he had a stable life. He was a man who believed in routines, in the quiet dignity of skilled labor, in the promises you make and keep. That foundation crumbled on a Tuesday evening in May. Joelle, his wife of 3 years, stood in the doorway of their bedroom, a brand new $250 Samsonite suitcase at her feet. Its wheels stark against the beige carpet of their 900-square-foot condo. She was wearing a $350 dress he'd never seen before, a vibrant, hopeful blue that seemed to mock the dim lighting of the hallway. "I've packed my bags," she said, her voice devoid of the warmth he once cherished. "I don't need you, Pierce. I don't need this." The "this" was a sweeping judgment that encompassed the condo he'd bought before they even met, the reliable 2018 Honda Civic they shared, and him, the man with grease permanently etched into the lines of his hands. He just stood there, his lunchbox from work still in one hand, the scent of metal and coolant clinging to his $30 work shirt, and watched the woman he loved erase their life together with a few callous words. 4 months later, his phone would ring, and the sound of her crying from a cheap motel room would be the final, devastating confirmation of a betrayal he had quietly endured for 120 days. We talk a lot about love and loss on this channel, but what happens when the person who promised to build a life with you decides to tear it down without a second thought? And what do you do when they come back, expecting you to help them rebuild from the rubble they created? Let us know in the comments what you think Pierce should do, and stick with us to see how this quiet, underestimated man reclaims his peace. The facade of their marriage had been cracking for a long time, but Pierce, ever the patient craftsman, kept trying to patch it. He was a man who found beauty in function, in things that worked reliably. His pre-marriage condo on the west side of Wichita wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. He'd put 20% down on the $125,000 price tag 6 years ago, and his monthly mortgage of $780 was a comfortable expense. It was his. Joelle had called it cramped and starter, even though they had a spare bedroom. She wanted a sprawling house in Eastboro, something with a 3-car garage and a price tag north of $400,000. "We could afford it if you were more ambitious," she'd say, flipping through a glossy real estate magazine at their modest $400 oak dining table. Pierce was ambitious. He was one of the top machinists on the 737 fuselage line, trusted with components worth tens of thousands of dollars. His ambition was in the perfect calibration of a CNC machine, in a tolerance held to 1,000th of an inch. It was a quiet, tangible ambition that didn't translate to the flashy world Joelle and her mother Diana admired. Diana was the ever-present voice in Joelle's ear, a constant whisper of discontent. She lived in a tidy, $1,500 a month rental duplex in Riverside, a fact she'd lamented at every opportunity. "It's just for now," she'd say, sipping the $15 bottle of Pinot Grigio Pierce had bought for their Sunday dinner. "A woman of my taste shouldn't be in a duplex." Diana's taste was expensive, and she had instilled that same aspiration in her daughter, but without the work ethic to match. Joelle worked part-time as a receptionist at a high-end salon, bringing in around $18,000 a year, most of which was spent on maintaining an image far beyond their means. A $90 manicure here, a $400 handbag there. Pierce would see the credit card statements and feel a familiar knot tighten in his stomach. He'd tried to talk to her about a budget, about their shared goals. He printed out spreadsheets showing how they could save for a down payment on a new house if they just cut back. "Spreadsheets are for poor people, Pierce," she'd scoffed, tossing the papers onto the counter. "Successful people have accountants." The last year had been a series of small, calculated withdrawals on her part. She stopped wanting to go to his company picnics. "It's just a bunch of guys in cheap polos talking about overtime," she complained. She started spending more and more time with her mother. He'd come home from a 10-hour shift, his body aching, to an empty condo, and a note on the fridge. "Dinner with Mom, leftovers in the fridge." The leftovers were usually his own, from a meal he had cooked the night before. The financial separation began subtly. A year ago, after a particularly bad argument about a $2,800 charge on their joint credit card for a weekend trip to Kansas City with her mother that he wasn't invited on, Pierce had made a decision. "We need separate finances for a while, Joelle, to get things under control." He had framed it as a temporary measure. He'd opened a new checking account at his credit union and had his $66,000 salary direct deposited there. He continued to pay the mortgage, the utilities, the car insurance, all the essential bills from his account. He gave her a debit card linked to a separate account into which he transferred $500 a month for groceries and household expenses. "This feels like an allowance," she'd sneered. Her own paychecks, she insisted, were for her personal expenses. Pierce, wanting peace, had agreed. He had no idea he was inadvertently building the financial firewall that would one day save him. He loved her. Or at least, he loved the memory of the woman he'd married. The woman who had once admired the intricate custom-made jewelry box he'd crafted for her from scrap titanium in his spare time. It was a marvel of engineering, with hidden compartments and a polished, swirling finish. "Your hands are magic," she had whispered then, her fingers tracing the patterns. Now those same hands were a source of her disdain. "Can you please wash your hands before you touch the new towels?" she'd say, gesturing to the $50 Egyptian cotton set she'd bought. "You have grease under your nails." The jewelry box, which had once held a place of honor on her dresser, was now tucked away in a closet, filled with dusty, forgotten trinkets. It was a perfect, painful metaphor for their marriage. The escalating betrayal wasn't a sudden storm, it was a slow, creeping rot that had been festering for months, orchestrated by Diana and executed by Joelle. Looking back, Pierce could see the breadcrumbs leading to that final Tuesday in May. The betrayal had been a 4-month project. It began in January with a new friend Joelle started mentioning. His name was Marcus. "He's a client at the salon," she said casually one night, scrolling through her phone. A $1,200 iPhone 14 that was a recent gift to self. "He's a real estate developer. Super successful." Pierce, stirring a pot of chili, nodded. "That's nice." He was a man who trusted his wife, who believed in the vows they had taken in a small Wichita church, surrounded by family and friends. Soon Marcus was a recurring character in her life. There were networking lunches and after-work drinks with the girls that now conveniently included Marcus and his business associates. Pierce, working a swing shift that often kept him at the spirit plant until 11 p.m., was none the wiser. He would come home to a cold, empty bed, finding a text sent hours earlier. "Late night with the girls. Don't wait up. XO." Diana was the campaign manager for this whole operation. During their now strained Sunday dinners, she would drop comments like bombs. "You know, Joelle has so much potential," she'd say, pointedly looking at Pierce's worn-out $89 Timex watch. "She just needs to be with someone who can help her realize it. Someone with vision." The implication was clear. Pierce, with his calloused hands and his steady, union-protected job, lacked vision. He was a foundation, not a skyscraper. One Sunday in March, he overheard them in the kitchen. He had come back inside to grab his wallet and heard their hushed, excited tones. He said his wife just doesn't understand him. Joelle whispered, "He's in a loveless marriage, Mom. He's looking at properties for us. Something near the Crestview Country Club." "Now don't you get ahead of yourself, baby," Diana cooed, but her voice was laced with triumph. "You have to handle this delicately. You can't just leave. You need a plan. He needs to see you're independent, that you're making this choice for you." Pierce felt the floor drop out from under him. He stood frozen in the hallway, the sound of their plotting mixing with the pounding in his ears. He backed away slowly, went back outside, and sat in his car for 10 minutes, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. He didn't confront them. What was the point? He was a machinist. He understood that some things, once broken, couldn't be fixed. They were already sheared beyond repair. His heart was a fractured component, and all he could do was watch the cracks spread. From that day on, he moved through his life like a ghost. He was living in a house of strangers. The woman he shared a bed with was planning a new life with another man, and her mother was her co-conspirator. He watched as new, expensive items appeared in the condo: a $2,400 Burberry trench coat, a $1,500 Louis Vuitton purse. "Marcus says it's important to dress for the life you want," Joelle had said, twirling in front of the hallway mirror. Pierce didn't ask where the money came from. He knew. He also knew these were not gifts purchased with a credit card he had any liability for. She was being coached. The cruelty became more direct. One evening, he came home early, hoping to surprise her, maybe suggest a movie. He found her on the phone with Deanna, her back to the door. "I just can't stand it anymore," Joelle was saying, her voice a whine. "He came in smelling like a machine shop again. I feel like I'm married to a mechanic. Marcus wears a Tom Ford suit that costs more than Pierce makes in a week. Do you know how embarrassing that is?" Pierce didn't say a word. He just backed out of the condo, closing the door so softly she never knew he was there. He walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench until the sun went down, the city lights of Wichita blinking on one by one. He felt a profound, hollow numbness. The pain was so large, it was almost abstract. She wasn't just leaving him. She was disgusted by him, by the very work that paid for the roof over her head, the food she ate, the life she was so desperate to escape. His luminous, deep brown skin felt cold under the park lights, and for the first time in a long time, he felt utterly alone. He started documenting everything, not out of a desire for revenge, but out of a need for self-preservation. He took pictures of the new, expensive items. He saved the text messages. He started a private journal, noting the dates and times of her late nights, and the casual, cruel things she would say. He was a methodical man, and this is what he knew how to do: gather data, analyze the failure, and prepare for the inevitable breakdown. The final 2 weeks were the worst. She was giddy, barely bothering to hide her excitement. She was emotionally already gone, just waiting for the physical departure. She hummed as she packed boxes, claiming she was decluttering. She was shipping her best things to Diana's duplex. "Just making more space in here," she'd say with a bright, false smile. Then came the Tuesday, the day she stood in the doorway with her new suitcase, her face a mask of cold resolve. "I don't need you, Pierce. I don't need this." He just nodded slowly. He didn't beg. He didn't yell. He didn't ask where she was going. He already knew. As she rolled her $250 Samsonite suitcase out the door and into the waiting, gleaming white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car he recognized from her Instagram pictures of Marcus, he felt a strange sense of relief. The waiting was over. The failure had finally occurred. Now the cleanup could begin. The 4 months that followed were a masterclass in strategic restraint. Pierce did not play dumb in the sense of gathering evidence against a cheating spouse. The betrayal had already happened, openly and without apology. He played a different game. He acted normal to the outside world, a man simply processing a separation, while inside he was methodically rebuilding his fortress and watching the enemy's camp from a distance. The day after Joel left, a Wednesday, he went to work. His supervisor, a man named Dave, pulled him aside. "Heard you're going through some stuff, man. You need a day?" Pierce, his hands steady as he wiped down a lathe, shook his head. "I'm better here, Dave. Thanks." The noise of the machine shop, the hum of electricity, the precise, demanding nature of the work, it was a comfort. It was real. In the shop, if you did the work right, the outcome was predictable. Life had suddenly become very unpredictable. His first call was not to a lawyer, but to his credit union. He explained the situation, and following their advice, made sure every joint financial tether was severed. The grocery debit card was canceled. He changed the passwords on all his accounts. He confirmed that his name was the only one on the condo's deed and the mortgage. Each action was a quiet click of a lock, securing his perimeter. His savings account, containing a hard-won $18,500, was his alone. His 401k, with a respectable balance of $72,000, was untouchable. He was financially secure, a fact Joel and Diana had never truly appreciated. They saw his $66,000 salary as a limitation. They never saw the careful, disciplined savings that made him strong. Diana was the primary source of information, though she didn't know it. She would call him, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Pierce, honey, I am just so sorry about all this," she said a week after Joel left. "She's just finding herself, you know? A woman has to follow her heart." "I see," Pierce would say, his voice calm and even. He was cleaning the gutters on a Saturday morning. "How is she doing?" "Oh, she is thriving," Diana gushed, exactly as Pierce knew she would. Absolutely thriving. "Marcus is a wonderful man, a provider. He's showing her a whole new world. They're looking at a beautiful property, gated community. She's finally happy, Pierce. I hope you can be happy for her." "I'm glad she's happy," he would reply, and it wasn't entirely a lie. He was glad the charade was over. Each of Diana's phone calls was a gift. She was building his case for abandonment for him, providing a running commentary on Joel's new life with another man. He never recorded the calls. He didn't need to. He just made notes in his journal afterward. June 12th, spoke to Diana. Joel is thriving with Marcus, looking at property in a gated community. He filled the silence of the 900-square-foot condo. He took the spare bedroom, the one Joel had used as a closet for her overflow of clothes, and began turning it into a workshop. He bought a used $600 drafting table and a set of precision tools. He started sketching ideas for new projects, just like he used to before his time was consumed with trying to manage Joel's moods. He found the old titanium jewelry box he had made for her. He opened it, emptied out the forgotten trinkets, and polished it until the metal shone under the light. He placed it on his own dresser, a reminder of what his hands could create. His friends from work invited him out. "Come on, man, let's go grab a beer. Plenty of fish in the sea." Pierce would politely decline most nights. "Got a project I'm working on." He wasn't ready for the sea. He was still repairing his own ship. He spent his evenings reading, listening to old jazz records, and cooking simple, satisfying meals for himself. He discovered he liked the quiet. He liked the order. He liked knowing that when he placed his keys in the bowl by the door, they would be in the exact same spot in the morning. The only time the facade nearly cracked was in July. It was his birthday. He turned 37. He had told no one at work, but a well-meaning aunt posted about it on Facebook. At 9 p.m., his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard it was your birthday. Hope you have a good one." No name, but he knew it was her. She was checking on him, testing the waters. He stared at the message for a long time. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard. A dozen angry, wounded replies came to mind. "Thanks, I'm thriving too." Or, "How's the real estate market?" Instead, he did the hardest thing. He did nothing. He put the phone down, turned on an old John Coltrane album, and went back to sanding a piece of walnut for a new bookshelf he was building. The silence was his response. It was a language she, who thrived on drama and reaction, would not understand. But it was the only language he was willing to speak. He was playing the long game. He was acting normal, living his life, and waiting. He knew, with the certainty of a machinist who understands stress and breaking points, that the life Joelle and Diana had built was a hollow structure. It was made of cheap materials and false promises. And sooner or later, it would collapse under its own weight. He just had to be patient. The 4 months of summer bled into the cool, crisp air of early autumn. Pierce had settled into a new rhythm. Work, home, project, sleep. He had finished the walnut bookshelf, and it stood proudly in his living room, filled with books on engineering, history, and jazz. His neat locks had grown longer, and he'd started seeing a new barber, an old-timer named Gus, whose shop was a neighborhood institution. The condo felt less like an empty nest and more like a sanctuary. He had reclaimed the space as his own. He had marked the passage of time by Diana's phone calls, which had become less frequent and slightly less triumphant. The gushing updates about the gated community had ceased. The last time she called in early September, there was a new, brittle edge to her voice. "Joelle is just so busy," she'd said a little too quickly. "This new life, it's a lot to manage. She sends her best, of course." Pierce had simply said, "Tell her I'm fine," and ended the call. He knew the narrative was starting to fray. It was a Friday night, October 20th. At 11:30 p.m., the discovery finally came. Not through a private investigator or a mutual friend, but directly from the source, delivered through a 6-inch screen. Pierce was on his couch, a book open in his lap, a cup of chamomile tea on the coaster beside him. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. His phone, a simple $250 Android he'd bought to replace the one on their old family plan, buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a name he hadn't seen in 4 months. Joelle. He stared at it. His heart gave a single hard thump against his ribs. For 120 days he had wondered what this moment would feel like. He had imagined anger or a bitter sense of victory. Instead, he felt a deep, weary calm. He let it ring, watching the name pulse on the screen. 1 ring, 2, 3. He thought about her standing in the doorway, her face cold. He thought about her voice on the phone with her mother, dripping with disgust. He thought about the silence he had cultivated, the peace he had painstakingly built in this small condo. On the 5th ring, he pressed the red decline button. A moment of pure, uninterrupted silence followed. Then the phone buzzed again. A voicemail notification, he ignored it. Another buzz. A text message. "Pierce, please pick up. I need to talk to you. It's important." He read the words, his face impassive. He took a sip of his tea. It was still warm. Another buzz, and another. "Please. I'm in trouble." Then, a new kind of notification appeared. A request for a video call. Curiosity, or perhaps a final lingering shred of something he once called love, made him accept. Her face appeared on his screen, pixelated and distorted by the poor connection. But even through the digital noise, the devastation was clear. She was in a dark, cramped room. The wall behind her was a sickly yellow, stained and peeling. It was a motel room. He could see the cheap, bolted-down art in the corner of a polyester bedspread. Her normally immaculate hair was a mess, her own natural coils flattened in some places and frizzy in others, as if she'd been crying into a pillow. Her face? which she usually adorned with a $70 foundation and a full suite of cosmetics, was bare and puffy. Black streaks of mascara, probably from a cheap non-waterproof tube, ran down her cheeks like dark tears. She was wearing a thin, worn-out sweatshirt. The confident, radiant woman who had left in a $350 dress was gone. In her place was a stranger, looking lost and broken. "Pierce!" she sobbed, her voice cracking. The sound was raw, stripped of all its former arrogance. "Oh, thank God, I didn't know who else to call." "Where are you, Joelle?" he asked, his own voice sounding distant to his ears. "I'm at a motel," she choked out. "A Motel 6 out by the airport. It's all I could afford." The pieces clicked into place. The story Diana had so carefully constructed was a lie. The real estate developer, the gated community, the life of luxury, it had all been a fantasy. "What happened to Marcus?" he asked, not out of jealousy, but out of a need to understand the full scope of the failure. A fresh wave of tears racked her body. "He went back to his wife," she whispered, the words thick with shame. "He was never going to leave her. He told me so last week. He said it was just a fling. He dropped me off here and blocked my number. His wife found out everything." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of her ragged breathing. "My rent here is due on Sunday," she finally said, her voice small. "It's $84 a night. I don't have it, Pierce. I don't have anything. My mom, she can't help. She's already so angry with me. Can you help me? Just for a little while? Until I get back on my feet?" And there it was, the discovery, the full, unvarnished truth. The betrayal wasn't just that she had left him for another man. The betrayal was that she had gambled their entire history on a fantasy, and having lost, she had come back to him, expecting a bailout. She hadn't called to apologize. She had called to collect. In that moment, watching her cry in a dingy $84 a night motel room, Pierce didn't feel anger or pity. He felt a profound and final sense of clarity. The woman he had married was gone. Perhaps she had never existed at all. The video call ended with a vague promise from Pierce. "Let me think, Joelle. I'll figure something out." He disconnected, and the screen went black, reflecting his own stoic face. The image of her, broken and desperate, in the sickly yellow light of the Motel 6, was burned into his mind. The old Pierce, the man from 4 months ago, would have been in his car already, his wallet out, ready to fix the problem. But that man was gone, dismantled piece by her cruelty and his own hard-won wisdom. This was his strategic planning phase. It didn't involve whiteboards or a team of advisors. It took place in the quiet of his own mind, in the space he had so carefully cultivated. He walked into his small workshop and ran his hand over the smooth, finished surface of the walnut bookshelf. He had built this. It was solid. It was real. His life now had to be the same. He sat at his $600 drafting table, a space for creation and precision, and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. He didn't write down pros and cons. He wrote down principles. 1. Do no harm. He would not be cruel. He would not seek revenge. Vengeance was a hot, messy emotion, and he was a man who dealt in cool, precise lines. 2. Maintain boundaries. He would not re-involve himself in her life. He would not become her safety net, her emergency contact, her emotional support. That door was closed, locked, and bolted. 3. Offer a path, not a solution. He would not give her money. Money was a patch, not a fix. It would make him a part of her cycle of dependency and crisis. Instead, he would provide a resource, a tool she could choose to use or not. It was the machinist's way. Give a person the right tool, and they can build for themselves. 4. Finality. This action had to be the last one. It had to be a clean cut with no ragged edges. He thought about what she truly needed. It wasn't $84 for another night at a motel. It wasn't a ride back to his condo. She needed shelter. She needed counseling. She needed a structured environment to get her life back in order. She was, for all intents and purposes, a displaced person, a victim of her own disastrous choices. He opened his laptop and began to search. Women's Shelters Wichita. Transitional Housing Services. He read about the Interfaith Ministries program, about the YWCA Women's Crisis Center. These places offered more than just a bed. They offered case management, job counseling, and a path towards self-sufficiency. They were designed for women in crisis, women who had hit rock bottom. Joel was there. He found the address for a highly rated transitional shelter not far from the city center. It had a clear intake process. It was safe. It was structured. It was the opposite of the chaos she was currently in. Next, he thought about the logistics. She was at a motel near the airport with no money and presumably no transportation. He opened the Lyft app on his phone. He could send a ride credit directly to her number, a one-way trip. He calculated the cost. It would be about $25. He decided to send a $50 credit. It was a generous, impersonal gesture. It was help, but from a distance. With his plan in place, he drafted a text message on his computer's notepad, refining the words until they were precise, compassionate, and utterly final. He would not call her. A phone call invited negotiation, emotion, and pleading. A text message was a document. It was clear. It was a statement. At 1:15 a.m., he was ready. He had his plan, his tools, and his script. The final step was to prepare for the aftermath. He knew that Monday morning, his first call would be to a divorce attorney. He did a quick search for family law attorneys in Wichita, finding a reputable firm downtown. Their website mentioned a $500 initial consultation fee. He made a note of the number. The divorce would be simple: no children, no joint assets of significant value, and a clear case of abandonment. Her call tonight was the final piece of evidence he needed. He looked at the piece of paper on his drafting table. The principles were clear. The plan was solid. This wasn't about saving Joelle. It was about saving himself, and in the process, offering her the only kind of help that wouldn't destroy him. A map to a door she had to walk through on her own? He felt a quiet resolve settle over him. The machinist was done analyzing the failure. It was time to execute the repair plan. At 1:30 a.m., the strike began. It was not a thunderous explosion, but a series of quiet, decisive clicks on a smartphone screen. Pierce sat on his couch, the living room lit only by the glow of his phone. He copied the carefully drafted text message and pasted it into a new message to Joelle. He read it one last time. Joelle, I am not going to send you money for the motel. I believe giving you cash would only be a temporary fix for a much larger problem. You need real structured support right now, and I am no longer in a position to provide that. However, I want you to be safe. I have sent a $50 Lyft credit to this number. It should be more than enough for a ride. I strongly urge you to use it to go to the YWCA Women's Crisis Center at 1111 North St. Francis. They offer safe, temporary shelter, food, and resources to help you get back on your feet. They are expecting new intakes tonight. This is the best path I can offer you. After this message, I will be blocking your number to maintain my own peace. The divorce papers will be filed on Monday citing abandonment. I wish you the best in finding the help you need. He pressed send. The blue message bubble appeared on the screen, a final, definitive statement. Immediately, he followed through on his promise. He went into her contact information, scrolled down, and pressed block this caller. He did the same for Diana's number as a preemptive measure. Then he sent the Lyft credit. A notification confirmed it was delivered. The first part of the strike was complete. The silence that followed in his condo was immense, a stark contrast to the storm he knew he had just unleashed. He turned his phone on silent and placed it face down on the coffee table. He would not be watching the real-time reaction. He did not need to. He could predict the sequence. The first reaction he imagined would be disbelief. Joelle, staring at her phone in the dim motel room, reading the words over and over. The cold, formal language, the mention of a shelter, the finality of it. It would be like a slap in the face with a legal document. Then would come the frantic attempts to get through. He could almost feel the phantom vibrations of the blocked calls and texts. They would hit the wall of his digital silence and bounce off into the void. She would try calling, texting, maybe even through social media. Next would be the call to her co-conspirator. He pictured her. Tears of frustration now replacing tears of desperation, calling Diana. He won't help. He blocked me. He told me to go to a homeless shelter. And then, Diana's fury. He could practically hear her voice, sharp and indignant. How dare he? After everything, the nerve of that man. She would try calling him herself, only to find she was also blocked. The controlled, coordinated strike had cut off both heads of the snake at once. Pierce went to bed. He slept more soundly than he had in a year. He woke up on Saturday morning at his usual time, 6 a.m. The sun was just beginning to cast a pale light over Wichita. He made coffee, the rich aroma filling his quiet kitchen. He picked up his phone. As he expected, there was a string of notifications. 27 blocked calls from Joelle's number, 15 from Diana's, a dozen voicemails, 3 emails from a new address Joelle must have created on the fly. He sat at his clean, orderly dining table and decided to listen to the voicemails, not for the emotional content, but as a final data-gathering exercise. He was the machinist, examining the wreckage. The first voicemail from Joelle was from 1:35 a.m. Her voice was incredulous. "A shelter? Are you serious, Pierce? A shelter? I'm your wife. You can't do this. Call me back right now." The second, from 1:45 a.m., was pleading. Okay, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have left the way I did. I was stupid. Just please send the money for the room. We can talk about everything else tomorrow. Please, Pierce. The third, from 2:15 a.m., was angry. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Sitting there in your perfect little condo that I decorated. You always wanted to see me fail. You're pathetic. It was a callback to her own words, twisted and projected onto him. The fourth was from Diana, at 2:30 a.m. Her voice was a low growl. "You listen to me, you ungrateful little man. My daughter is on the street because of you. You will fix this, you will call her, and you will bring her home, or I will make it my mission to ruin you. Do you understand me?" He noted the classic antagonist tactic. Blame reversal. There were more. A chaotic symphony of desperation and rage. The final voicemail was from Joelle, time-stamped at 4:07 a.m. It was just the sound of her, sobbing. A raw, animal sound of complete and utter defeat. He listened to them all, his face a neutral mask. He felt nothing. No pity, no anger, no satisfaction. It was just data confirming a hypothesis. The structure had failed exactly as predicted. He deleted the voicemails one by one. He deleted the emails without reading them. The strike was over. The cleanup of his own life was nearly complete. On Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp, he called the law firm of Miller & Associates. "Yes, I'd like to schedule a consultation with a divorce attorney," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I'll be paying the $500 retainer myself. My wife abandoned our home 4 months ago. No, there are no children. No, There are no joint assets. The strike was clean. It was precise. And it was final. The consequences of Pierce's quiet, decisive action cascaded through Joelle and Diana's lives, not with the explosive force of a bomb, but with the slow, grinding certainty of a millstone. The downfall was not an event. It was a process, each stage enumerated by loss and humiliation. First, there was the immediate consequence, the Motel 6. With no money from Pierce and checkout looming, Joelle was faced with the stark reality of his text message. She had two choices: become homeless on the streets of Wichita or use the $50 Lyft credit for its intended purpose. After a night of frantic, unanswered calls, her pride shattered and her options exhausted, she made the call. A blue Toyota Camry, a Lyft, arrived at the Motel 6 at 10:45 a.m. on Sunday morning. The driver, a kind-faced woman who offered her a bottle of water, took her to the YWCA Women's Crisis Center on St. Francis Street. Joelle, the woman who dreamed of country clubs and German luxury cars, walked through the doors of a shelter, carrying her life in a single, worn-out tote bag. The $1,500 Louis Vuitton purse was long gone, pawned weeks ago for gas money and cheap motel rooms. Second, the legal consequence. On Tuesday, a process server arrived at Diana's duplex in Riverside. Diana, expecting a flower delivery or perhaps a package she'd ordered, opened the door to a stern-looking man who asked, "Are you Diana Morris? I'm looking for Joelle Franklin." Diana, flustered, admitted Joelle was staying with her temporarily. The man handed her a thick manila envelope. "She's been served." Inside were the divorce papers. The grounds were simple and brutal. Abandonment. The petition included a sworn statement from Pierce detailing the date she left, the evidence of her cohabitation with another man, corroborated by Diana's own cheerful phone calls, and the final, desperate call from the Motel 6. There was nothing to contest. Joelle was forced to sign, her signature a quiet admission of her complete and total defeat. Third, the financial consequence. The divorce was finalized in less than 90 days because of the pre-marriage ownership of the condo, the lack of joint accounts, and the clear case of abandonment. The settlement was swift and devastatingly simple for Joelle. Pierce kept the condo, its entire equity his. He kept his 401k, valued at over $72,000. He kept his savings of $18,500. He kept the Honda Civic, which was in his name. Joelle was legally entitled to nothing. The judge awarded her a one-time lump sum payment of $1,500, her share of the marital assets accumulated during their brief time with a joint account, an amount that was quickly consumed by the $2,000 in legal fees her cut-rate lawyer charged. She walked away from a 3-year marriage with less money than the cost of the Burberry trench coat she had flaunted. Fourth, the social consequence for Diana. The story she had been spinning for her friends, of her brilliant daughter leaving her boring husband for a wealthy, successful developer, collapsed spectacularly. Rumors started to fly in her social circle, a tight-knit group of women who met for bridge and book club. Diana's vague explanations about Joelle's sabbatical and transitional period weren't convincing. The truth, as it often does, seeped out. Diana's daughter hadn't just gotten a divorce. She'd been left by her affair partner and had to stay in a shelter. The triumphant mother of the bride-to-be was now the mother of the woman who had lost everything. The invitations to dinner parties dwindled. The phone calls stopped. Diana, who had built her identity on the reflected glory of her daughter's perceived success, found herself isolated, her social standing in ruins. The $1,500 a month duplex suddenly felt very small and very quiet. Finally, there was the personal consequence for Joelle. She stayed at the YWCA shelter for 6 weeks. She followed the rules, attended mandatory counseling sessions, and took a job placement workshop. For the first time in her life, there were no shortcuts, no men to bail her out, no mother to whisper poison in her ear. She eventually found a job, not at a high-end salon, but as a cashier at a Quick Trip, earning $14 an hour. She moved into a small, $650 a month studio apartment on the other side of town, furnished with items from a thrift store. The life of glamour was a distant, painful memory. She was 34 years old, starting from scratch, haunted by the ghost of a stable, loving life she had willfully destroyed. The consequences were not a punishment inflicted by Pierce. They were the natural and direct result of her own choices, a debt that had finally come due. A year passed. The sharp edges of the betrayal had softened into a dull, distant ache, and then eventually into a scar that was barely visible. Pierce's life, which had been thrown into chaos, had found a new, more authentic equilibrium. The seasons had turned, and with them, he had turned a new page. His life is not one of dramatic highs, but of deep, quiet satisfaction. The condo, once a silent battleground of memory, is now unequivocally his home. The walnut bookshelf is joined by a coffee table he crafted from reclaimed oak. His small workshop is his sanctuary, a place where he can bring order to wood and metal, a tangible expression of his creativity. His deep brown skin is luminous in the afternoon light that fills his living room, a space he has filled with plants, books, and the warm, inviting sounds of his vintage jazz collection. The most significant change was not what he acquired, but what he gave. After the divorce was finalized, he felt a pull to do something more. He remembered the name of the shelter he had sent Joelle to. He thought about the women there, women who, for 100 different reasons, had found themselves in crisis. He felt a sense of connection, not to Joelle's choices, but to the fundamental human need for safety and a second chance. So one Saturday, he drove to the YWCA Women's Crisis Center. He didn't go to the front door. He went to the maintenance office and asked if they needed a volunteer with his skills. The facility manager, a woman with tired eyes and a warm smile, looked at his calloused hands and gave him a tour. She showed him the broken cabinet hinges, the wobbly legs on the cafeteria tables, the donated crib that needed reinforcing. "We have a list a mile long," she said, "and a budget of $0. "I can fix these," Pierce said simply. Now, most Saturdays are spent there. He arrives at 8 a.m. in his reliable Honda, his own toolbox in the back. He spends the day repairing what is broken. He finds a profound sense of purpose in the work. He is not just fixing objects. He is contributing to a place of healing. He is making the environment safer and more dignified for women and children who have very little. The residents call him Mr. Pierce. They see a kind, quiet black man who shows up, does the work without fanfare, and leaves things better than he found them. He never speaks of his own story. He doesn't have to. His actions are his testimony. His resolution is not found in a new romance or a dramatic life change. It is found on his small porch on a quiet Sunday evening in Wichita. The sun is setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. A cool breeze rustles the leaves of the large oak tree in his front yard. He is sitting in a sturdy wooden rocking chair he built himself, sipping a glass of iced tea. He is not lonely. He is at peace. His life is not defined by what he lost, but by what he built and what he continues to build, both for himself and for others. True wealth is not measured in the price of a car or the square footage of a house. It's not found in designer clothes or gated communities. True wealth is resilience. It is the quiet strength to withstand a storm and the compassion to help others find shelter. It is the dignity of skilled work, the peace of a quiet home, and the knowledge that your character is the only asset that can never be taken from you. Pierce is a wealthy man. He sits on his porch, the picture of contentment, a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest love story is the one you write with yourself after the final chapter with someone else has ended. What do you think of Pierce's journey? Has a moment of quiet strength ever redefined your own life? Share your stories of resilience and rebuilding in the comments below. We believe in the power of community, and your story might be the light someone else needs to see today. For more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding true worth, be sure to like this video and subscribe to Love Beyond Pride.